not about doing something. It's about allowing the brain and the body to do what it does best. The body's intelligence knows what to do, but we have to get all the stress and interference out of the way so the body can do the work that it knows what to do. It already has the instruction set. Like I said, like with the right frequency generator, if you knew the right frequency to tune, our body would tune and we'd become superhuman.
Dr. Porter has written 13 books available on Amazon, a number of which he has co-authored with his wife. He won a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Interdisciplinary Association of Functional Neurosciences and Rehabilitation. This is because Dr. Porter has been on the cutting edge of brainwave entrainment technology for 3 decades. As we dive into the interview, you're going to notice 2 things about Dr. Porter. First, he is incredibly passionate about his work and has done and continues to do as it helps people. He is passionate about research, and of course he is, because the results from using his device BrainTap are always positive and often profound. And one bonus thing you'll notice is Dr. Porter is extremely knowledgeable and can talk expertly about all things the brain.
You got to become comfortable being uncomfortable. You connect that breath, so you breathe it into 4, you study that tension and stress in the body, then you breathe out to the count of 8. And when you breathe out to the count of 8, you're triggering the parasympathetic system. And what will happen is...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity podcast. I met our next guest, Dr. Porter, at the Biohacking Conference. I had the privilege of doing a short interview with him live on the exhibit floor, and I am so excited to dive even deeper in this interview. Dr. Porter has written 13 books available on Amazon, a number of which he has co-authored with his wife, which I think is pretty cool. I'm not sure I could do that. He won a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Interdisciplinary Association of Functional Neurosciences and Rehabilitation. This is because Dr. Porter has been on the cutting edge of brainwave entrainment technology for 3 decades. As we dive into the interview, you're going to notice 2 things about Dr. Porter. First, he is incredibly passionate about his work and has done and continues to do as it helps people. He is passionate about research, and of course he is, because the results from using his device BrainTap are always positive and often profound. And one bonus thing you'll notice is Dr. Porter is extremely knowledgeable and can talk expertly about all things the brain. If you want to learn to overcome stress, lose weight, stop smoking, manage pain, accelerate learning, and enjoy superb sleep, if you've heard Dr. Porter speak before, just know we're going to be touching on his new book, Brain Fitness Blueprint, so you want to listen to this entire interview. Dr. Porter, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, it's great to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So you started studying electronics engineering technology. Then you shifted to NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, something that I love. Then you got a PhD in counseling psychology, and you have on LinkedIn listed 6 different forms of training, from Deepak Chopra to E-Myth, actually a book in one of my previous companies that I would give to every single one of our employees. E stands for the entrepreneurial myth. Amazing book if you're an entrepreneur and growing your business. You clearly have a deep passion for self-improvement and self-exploration, and much of this training is about how to help others. If you think back to your childhood, where do you think this drive to learn and specifically helping others comes from?
Well, I think my dad, being a gifted alcoholic, he was very good at it. Everything could be going great, and he would find a reason to go get drunk and leave 9 kids and a wife at home. And when he got help doing something called the Silva method, which was a meditation process, he came home and he said, hey, if I'm going to do this, and by the way, he tried everything. I mean, it was like every 3 months he was going into a rehab center. We thought Dad was just taking his week-long vacations, but they were trying to get him cleaned up. But the church came over and they said, hey, look, we have this process called, it's a ultra relaxation seminar. He went there one night, relaxed his body, and he realized at that moment, a light bulb went off, and he said, wow, I'm drinking to try to relax. But it's not working, right? Because the alcohol gets in there. I tell people there's a reason they call it spirits. You're like possessed by the spirits, right? And So, and I was, at the time, I was a very gifted troublemaker, and I outlined the whole thing in my book, Awaken the Genius, because what my dad told me was, as we started to learn the Silva method, my dad is one of those guys that, and he was a Mensa person, he was very intelligent, but that didn't stop him from, sabotaging his life. But he didn't want that for his kids. So out of 9 kids, we only had one brother that tried to prove him wrong, which means to drink alcohol. And what happened was he got in trouble, and now, thankfully, he's clean now. But what we found out was that no one is really an alcoholic. Everyone has a problem with alcohol. There's not, they did this with race car drivers and that, but we can get into that maybe later in the show. But what my dad taught me was, hey, what you can hold in your mind, you can hold in your hand, you can have in your life. And so he started teaching me that at a very young age with a book called As a Man Thinketh. And so I was held back in second grade. I know that Sister Barbara liked me so well. That's why I was held back, not because I was not intelligent.
She was generous that way.
Yeah. And so what he had me do, he said, the book says, with faith without works is dead. And this is true in anything. And when we think about neuroscience, you can think it in your mind, but if you don't take the action steps necessary that you're called to make, and a lot of people don't like that because we learn and our brain grows through stress. Some people don't like that stress. I call it the risk zone. We have to risk letting go of the rung that we're hanging on to get to the rung we want to go to. And we have to believe that we have the strength and the determination to carry us through, because there's going to be uncertainty. And I think that book changed my mind, because I started to realize it was my thinking that was causing all the problems. And then, so unlike other kids, I remember at 12 years old asking for Christmas, what I wanted was a cassette player, if those people remember cassettes.
Those are a thing that play music, or speeches or audiobooks.
Yeah. So there was an alarm clock that I found that actually would wake you up to a cassette, and I recorded my own affirmations. And I started doing them at 12 years old, and my dad would help me structure them. And it's nice because that book you were talking about, the Brain Fitness Blueprint, is Louise Hay's company. She's now passed away, but they now have, we accepted their offer to publish the book, which is coming out in August. And I was using a lot of her affirmations, and you can heal your life. Because my dad did that I recommend every parent do. When we were sent to our room after my dad got help, and by the way, my dad never drank again because he realized that it was his thinking. What he found out was that meditation became his medication. So when you think about every day, if he could unlock the world's greatest pharmacy, the human brain, for 10 to 15 minutes, he could change his life. And what I mean by that is your brain can at the simple thought, just a thought, can release any number of 30,000 different neurochemicals that can either help you or hinder you, depending upon what you're thinking about. And we'll probably get into more of that later in the show. But my dad found out if you can start to anticipate something positive happening through you instead of something negative happening to you, then your life is going to improve. And I embodied that, and I didn't really like sports at the time with my dad. I mean, I liked to play sports, but I was more of an artist. I was the kind of geeky kid that liked to just play with things and build things, and I loved electronics. Even though there was no electronics, we didn't have computers like they have today. I would probably wouldn't have been one of those screen kids that had a suntan from the screen I was looking at. But I went to school early on to work on electronics, and got my certificate in that. And then I went to school at Ferris State University to industrial electronics. There was still no CRTs. We didn't have those then. But as soon as we had the computer, I was like, man, this is what I'm made for, this technology. And then lucky for me, I ran into a company called Light and Sound Research, and we invented the very first portable light and sound machine called the MC Square, which I also talk about in that book, Awaken the Genius, because I think that we didn't know then the science that we have today. People don't understand the reality that not too long ago, we didn't know that the brain could change. We thought, hey, this brain is fixed, but now something called neuroplasticity, which simply means that our brain can remodel based on the stress and the experiences we have in our life. And now we know even further that it happens every 40 seconds. Every DNA pair in your body changes based on everything. When somebody says, what is it based on? Everything. I mean, this intelligence that we have within us, this innate intelligence, is always observing our environment. The light, the sound, the vibration, the smells, the taste, the touch, what we have, what's our past history, our parents' past history, our future projections. Everything's going into this, and this 100 billion neurobit processor is compiling all that information at the speed of thought. So the speed of light would take, to get across the universe would take hundreds of thousands of years at the speed of light. Mm-hmm. But the speed of thought, you and I are just there. Yeah. So it's instant, which means we're non-locale. And they're now proving this in neuroscience, that our thoughts are more than things. Our thoughts actually magnetize and create the things that we perceive, believe, and achieve in our lifetime, because we can't talk this way off the air. But, these things that we're seeing in the world are not solid. These are teeming with energy and electrons and information. And we are teeming with energy, electrons, and energy. We're energy beings. And we're not physical beings. We're energy beings. And I think now with what we're seeing is, for me, I was just fortunate that my mother and father, got help. My mother first, and I should back up a little bit, because I think nutrients are the number one thing for the brain. You can't outthink a bad diet. You can't just meditate and turn candy bars into nutrition. Your body. I always tell people, if you want God to build the house, you got to. But what He's dependent upon is you delivering the materials. If you deliver the materials, then the house can be built. If you don't deliver the materials, you'll build it with whatever's there. And so nutrients are first. And then number two, which is happening now today, I think we're seeing it more than ever, is the inactivity of our youth and even our adults. I mean, I'm standing up doing this interview right now because I read something years ago that said 20 minutes of sitting is equivalent to smoking a cigarette. So in what we now know...
Hold on a second. I need to...
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So in the... and I do have a sit-down desk too, and that you have to do it sometimes. But the reality is that we are designed to move and breathe. And then now, because of technology, we have a technology problem, because what are we looking at? Screens all day long. We're getting exposed to light that is not the right light for our brain. And so what I did in the 80s and since then to now is continue to perfect a system that can train the brain using a science called frequency following response, which I didn't create. That's been around since the 1800s, because the shamans would use it with sound, and they would use it and Mesner used it, and a lot of other people used it to entrain the cells. Every one of our cells right now, Chris, as we're talking, when communicating, we are creating a quantum entanglement, because now I have your image of you in my head, and we had the experience at the biohacking convention. So my brain is mixing and matching these. We can never be separated again. So that's why it's so important when Charlie Tremendous Jones said, you are the sum total of the 5 people you hang around most. And just one more fact before, and I'll stop and let you talk.
I like it, yeah.
Charlie Tremendous Jones was saying that, but now neuroscience tells us that we are not only the 5 people that we're hanging around most, but neuroscience tells us that 7 generations in our past are influencing our present. Now, this is pretty bizarre, because the Hopi Indians said 7 generations forwards and backwards are influencing our current life, which is pretty spooky, right? That our future could be actually happening while we're in the past. And so as you think about these quantum probabilities, the brain is always computing and figuring it out. So the number one thing we need to think about, and what I try to train people to do, is look at life as an opportunity. Because if you're an opportunist, which means that you're looking at life as what's in it for me? How is this a great day? This is a great world. I can tell you right now, if you took all the technology we have today and you could go back to the 1700s, let's say, you would be a god. Imagine, I mean, if I could just go back to 1976 and play Trivial Pursuit with Google, and nobody knew I had Google, and I had the Google glasses, and I could look at it and it would just give me the answer, they would think, oh my God. The reality is that we have access to that field of energy. It's just, you've probably heard the expression, hey, the internet's down. Well, sorry guys, the internet's never down. our connection to the internet is down. The same is true with consciousness. So as we increase and expand our consciousness and our capacity to handle and manage stress, we get the, basically we're in a field of energy that gives us the potential to do incredible things. And that's what excites me. And even though I've been in this business since 1986 with light and sound, in 1982 with therapy, I feel like I just started. This is, I mean, the breakthroughs. We couldn't measure the brain. When you're talking about EEG and ECG off the air, you know, these are things that people go to bed and they can measure their sleep cycles. Are you kidding me? That was never possible 20 years ago. Yeah, you got your ring there. There's incredible technologies out there. And what we're finding is that technology can either help us or can hurt us. So I'm here to support helping us.
Okay, so just like I predicted, you can talk intelligently on so many different topics that almost every other sentence I saw a rabbit hole that you and I could go down, because I think we have parallels on a lot of this, and it would be exciting. In fact, even the interview that we did back at the biohacking conference just flowed so easily. I think even then we could have talked for hours. Just a couple of things, right? So the Silva method, is that something that you still incorporate in some of the stuff that you do today? Is that a core kind of technology, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, people that know Silva, and now I guess the Mind Valley group has bought the rights to Silva. My dad was a local, like he had a territory in Michigan. So we would do seminars. What I did at the A4M that we were at together, I've been doing that since I was a kid. We would go set up rooms for my dad, and we would do seminars, and we would teach people. And so they're teaching them, and I think it's a very valuable and really good training. But what I did was I put a technology piece to it. And yes, if you've done Silva before and you listen to my sessions, you're going to hear a lot of similarities, because this is what I grew up on. It's kind of like I can't escape it, you know. And at the end of my sessions, when I say, and this is so, you know, people will understand that's part of the Silva method, because you got to mark that out and tell the subconscious that the belief is there, the validity is there, the certainty is there, and then that emotion drives the behavior.
And I want to point out kind of two books. Awaken the Genius, you mentioned. That's your first book where you can kind of hear the story. Is that your first book? Or
yes, that's my first book.
And then As a Man Thinketh, you talked about being able to hold something in the hand and the mind and then being able to manifest it. Do you do vision boards? Do you do dream boards?
Yes, yeah, we've done that, and I do that all the time. In fact, every year on our anniversary, my wife and I will take a vacation, and we'll go over our goals for the year. And every morning in my calendar there's a place when I wake up after I do everything. I don't look at the phone until usually around 9:30 in the morning. But when I do, the first thing I look at is I just refresh my mind of the goals. They call this top of the mind awareness. You know, it's kind of like when you buy a new car and you thought nobody else had that car, but when you drive it off the lot, you start seeing them everywhere. So you want to keep in the top of your mind those things that you want to manifest or become aware of, because we live in a field of infinite possibilities. I like to tell people there's only an infinite number of possibilities for any one moment in time. So when you think, most people that have addictions, they only have one solution for an infinite number of problems. Do you understand the difference there?
Yeah.
So it's a shift in thinking. You know, if you have an addiction, that addiction is only because you have limited the scope of perception and the reality of possibilities for you. So how do you get out of that? Well, Einstein said you can't solve a problem on the same level it was created. So what we do at BrainTap, and what I've done for years, is take people out of the problem state into the solution field, create the solution, and then return with the solution to the problem, and then solve the problem. And the nice thing is that we now know, and validated through neuroscience, that our brain and body doesn't know the difference between our imaginary reality and our real reality, because they're both real to the subconscious mind.
So, again, we could go down so many rabbit holes. I want to stay on track. I want to talk a little bit about tap, and then there may be some extra meaning there. And then you just need to set the trap yourself so that you fall into it and you're exactly where you want to be. And then I want to get into the book because I think that's new and there's some exciting things there. So you came out with this initial electronic device, right? And we were kind of just winging it, all right, finger in the air, like this feels good. Talk about that evolution to your device now, because it's a complex device, right? It's got lasers on your ears. It's got your visual field. There's auditory. Talk about this kind of evolution, please.
Yeah, we have LEDs. They're not really lasers because they're low-level light, but the light intensity is the equivalent to a laser treatment. So when you think of photic exchange, most people don't realize that on every cell we have something called a chromophore. This is a battery. So this battery absorbs energy in the form of light, sound, and vibration. So with vibration, you've probably been near a speaker at a concert and you feel that vibration. That fills your cells with energy. Now, once your cells are filled with energy, whether it's sound, light, or vibration, your cells will share it with you. And then you got to move. You get those happy feet. You start feeling good. So what we did was we said, hey, what happens to the brain? Because we were doing biofeedback. There was no neurofeedback. When somebody says, did you study neurofeedback? There was no neurofeedback when I went to school, unfortunately.
Didn't exist. Yeah.
I'm hoping around when they develop whatever's next, because there's going to be something next. We're evolving as a conscious species. So, but what we wanted to do was, pain only happens in one brainwave state. It's called beta. Beta is our reactionary mind. So when you're in a reactionary mind, think of the reactionary mind as that part of our brain that is always looking at life as a threat. Now, we need that. That's why we're survived. You and I are here because our ancestors had really good what they call reticular activating systems, which means they looked around and they avoided the pain and the suffering, and they survived, they thrived, and they passed on their genetic lineage to us. And that's why we're here. So, but those that didn't, they're not here anymore. You know, they're gone. So what happens though is in our behavioral processing and how we process the brain, when we close our eyes, our brain shuts down 30% of the neural functioning in the brain. Most of our brain is processing visual imagery in the world around us to keep us safe. So what we noticed was when people were trying to do things like make your hands warm, because we knew that if you make your hands warm, your headaches go away. It's a signal that blood flow and circulation are happening. If it's happening at the extremities, it's happening in the brain, and headaches go away. So we were working on that. We also looked at respiration. We knew if people did and we can talk about some breath work that the listeners can use even without the BrainTap, because there's some things to activate the brain. And there's different breath work for different times of the day or different reasons. And we can't go through all of them. There's so many of those. And then there's also techniques to go to sleep, because what has technology done for us? When I was growing up, one of the biggest accomplishments as a young man was to see the Star Spangled Banner on the television and the television station go out, because we only had 3 stations, you know, and now all you do is go, blip, let's go to the other station. Let's go to there's 150 choices or 300 choices or 1,000 choices. In the internet, it's infinite. You know, you can see about anything you want. So our brain never gets a chance to shut down. It used to be a big thing to stay up till 12 o'clock. Now it's like people are bragging on the fact that they get little sleep. Now we're knowing that sleep is probably your most important time of the day. Yeah. Because that's when neuroplasticity happens. It's where consolidation of memories happen. It's where you rest, relax, and rebuild. And so, but we didn't know that back then. We thought everybody was wearing on their sleeve, hey, I only sleep 4 hours. I only sleep 6 hours. I'm a superhuman. And now we're knowing, no, the longevity studies show 6.5 hours is best, and 1 hour of deep sleep, 2 hours of REM sleep is best. But we didn't know how to measure that. We have technology to do that now. So as we work with that, what I'm saying is that we have technology that can advance what we're doing. And with BrainTap, we looked at what are the technologies that are currently working, which we just published a study actually of all the comparative science, because BrainTap has a lot of science that we've done, but my science officer, Francisco Cedral, is on the board of 6 different neurological journals. So we combined all those studies and we found out that there is a lot of research out there just wasn't talking to each other. So when you think about light is most important, because when you meditate on your own, You probably heard people say, I can't meditate, my monkey mind goes crazy, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's because they don't have enough energy. You know, when we say, my child's too tired to sleep, most adults are too tired to meditate. They're too tired to sleep. It's not just the kids. So what happens when you bring light into the brain, just so the listeners understand this, when you bring light in, our body is designed to do this. It's not something I did. It's the body does this naturally. So if you're exposed to sunlight in different times of the day, it's going to do different things, and we'll probably get into that during the show. But that light energy is absorbed by the mitochondria. In fact, red blood cells absorb that light energy, and they're the delivery system. So the ears, when you talk about the lasers in the ears, but they're really 9 LEDs there, that LED is actually broadcasting a frequency called Nogier frequencies. And Dr. Nogier created something called auricular therapy. And what my doctors were doing was they were using lasers in the ears. And I said, well, what's the photic charge, which means how much light energy are they actually dispensing to the body? And so we found out that, hey, we could do that with LEDs, which are safe. You don't have to have a doctor there. You can put them on. So we're giving equivalent to 2 laser treatments every time you put on the BrainTap. Now, all the blood in your body goes through the ears every 3 to 4 minutes. Now, where does it go next? The ear blood is what regulates the temperature in the brain. So it goes directly into the brain. So it's one of the best sources to get energy into the brain in the form of photons. Now, the eyes, your eyes are closed. We use really low level light. It's only 8 LEDs. So think about the screen we're looking at right now, or if you're looking at this on your phone, there's millions of LEDs. So BrainTap uses 8. It's a very low dose. It doesn't have to be a lot, but remember, the brain has evolved since the dawn of history, or whatever. When at least 200,000 years they've clocked it back to. So when we were living on the earth and the light from the sun would come up, we would get a flash of light in our eyes. That flash of light would wake our brain up because it said, hey, we're now prey. People are on the prowl and we're in the food chain. We need to get up and get moving. So our reticular activating system, that default mode network that some people call, now becomes active. Now, most people, when they meditate, that goes crazy. They start talking to themselves, and every person out there has a communication loop. They say it's about 50,000 words. Most people, when they've done research, they say 80% of those words are negative. Because it's not because they're negative. I'm not saying that people are negative. We're doing that to preserve our life. So it's telling us, it's kind of like the Catholic Church. It's telling us all the things we're not supposed to do, but if you're a good Catholic like I was, you did all those things, except for kill people. Because
You did say you were a troublemaker.
Yeah, the brain doesn't know how to process a negative. So if I tell you not to think of a dancing pink elephant, don't think of the front door to your home, don't think of your favorite actor or actress, your brain's going to automatically picture those pictures. And now, so what we're going to do is we're going to use light energy to energize the brain to bring what's called ATP to the equation, because ATP is the currency of the body. Now, we're going to mirror that with an algorithm that I've been developing since 1986 with some technology where the sound and light are synchronized. So now we're creating a field, what we call a Gaussian field, and the reason they call that is when you get into the state, your brain harmonizes. Your energy, they've actually been able, Virginia Hunt out of UCLA was actually able to measure the energy that the body emits. And there's a study I'll tell you about in a moment that might fascinate the listeners. But then in the process, when we harmonize the brain and we lower its frequency, going from beta, which is a high frequency state, now higher than that, over 40 hertz is gamma, and we can get into that. That's like a super state, where the Buddhist adepts go and the big meditators. And we find that very creative people and healers are operating in that bandwidth. Most people don't have very little, maybe 2% of their brainwave activities in gamma. But gamma is like the bass drum to the brain. If without gamma, your brain dysregulates, you get dementia, Alzheimer's, and all these kind of things. So as we drop down, we drop into alpha. Alpha is a harmonizing brainwave. And in Silva, they taught you to go to what they called level. It was 10 hertz frequency. Now, every person can be trained to go to level by listening to a sound or going to the ocean. Most places in nature harmonize around 10 hertz. But that's just, now when you go there, what we know in science now is that as you go there, your field, your energy, which NIH actually in 1994 said we all have a biosphere, and that they actually say that, and it's right on their website, that illness starts in the field. It doesn't start in the tissues. When somebody says the issues are in the tissues, no, the tissues are the last thing. That's gross matter. But we have a field of energy that they talk about at the National Institute of Health that extends out to 16 feet around us. Now, in ancient cultures like in India, where I do a lot of research and we're partners over with Ames Paul, they call it the chakras or the aura, and you can call it whatever you want, but it's an energy field that carries information about you. And you're broadcasting that. So when people step into your field, they're broadcasting. So the more energy you have, the more powerful you are as a human being, because you are now become autonomous to what's going on around you. You don't get, you're like the bowling ball that has the energy to withstand a hit. But if you don't have any energy, people push you this way, that way, you're just going to go there. So as we expand this field of energy, then we can drop down into theta. Theta is the state where most Buddhist adepts go. Now, each of these brainwave states are linked to neurotransmitter production. So when somebody says, I love it when people say, we have a mental health crisis out there today. I said, no, we don't. We have a physiological problem today. We have terrible food that our body is trying to upregulate. We're being bombarded by electromagnetic frequencies that our body doesn't know how to handle, lights that are destroying the mitochondria, and our environment is literally killing us unless we do something to offset it. Like I'm sitting here, I have a grounding mat, on my keyboard and I'm on my feet, so it's like I'm outside, but I'm in my house, because our body's designed to be outside while it's light out, and we're exchanging these energies. But alpha creates acetylcholine. So what we find when people are stressed out is they start to lose that alpha bandwidth. So they don't create acetylcholine anymore. So they go get on an SSRI, which is terrible, because the problem isn't that they don't have enough serotonin. They have too much serotonin. Most brains we measure, 60% or more of the brain is in delta when they're awake. There's an expression, the masses are asleep. And I always tell people, in our 30,000 scans we've done over the last 10 years, they're not asleep, but their brain certainly wants to be. Because we find that it's linked to inflammation. Inflammation is probably the biggest killer. I mean, if you wanted to put a finger on something that's causing detriment to our health, it's inflammation. We need to bring down that inflammation. The problem is that when they give people like statins and these kind of things, they're actually stripping away our protective mechanisms against inflammation. So basically, I tell people it's like you have that foam protecting your home from burning away, and you just took the foam away. So what's going to burn? You're going to burn. You're going to get. And that's why there's this big onslaught of people having neuropathy, in their hands and feet. And then it goes into the brain and they have dementia and Alzheimer's, things like that. But now let's say we drop down, because we want to train people. It's easy to go to alpha. Anybody can do it. You can do it with shamanistic drums, music. In fact, there's a whole science out there called the Mozart effect, which is you can play classical Baroque music and you're just smarter. You don't have to tell the students anything. Your brain simply is harmonized. And think about it. You brought online all of these resources in your brain that help you to think, act, and respond differently and at a higher level. Now, when we drop down into theta, theta is a brainwave that's very thin. It's a very thin brainwave between 7 and 4 hertz frequency. So it's very limited. But it also matches the tree line. So if you go to the tree line of a mountain, you're going to be at 7.8 hertz frequency. They call it the Schumann frequency, the Earth frequency. Because from space, our planet actually resonates about 7.8 hertz frequency. That's the kind of, if you want to say, kind of like a bowling scores when you bowl 3 games and you get your average. That's our average frequency on Earth. Now, what theta does is it activates GABA. Now, GABA before COVID was the most researched neurotransmitter on Earth, because they believe that GABA supports sleep, it supports learning, it supports spiritual enlightenment, all of these things. So people were trying to figure out, how can we get a pill that does this? Well, the reality is you could never take enough pills. But if you have an experience, a direct experience with theta, you've just dumped $30,000 to $60,000 worth of neurochemicals into your bloodstream. But you made them, because the world's greatest pharmacy is between your ears, not in the corner drugstore. So now GABA is a precursor to something called DMT. DMT is what everyone out there in the psychedelic world, and I'm really researching it because, and we can talk maybe about that too if you want, but I've been doing a lot of research with some professionals and using a psilocybin and other things, and we're an integration tool for like PTSD in the military, because having an experience doesn't mean you made a change. It's like you went to a good movie. Now, how do you take that change and translate it into your life experience? That's where you drop into delta. So delta is the sleep cycle, and that sleep cycle is not awake. You can't program anything in delta, although I see people online saying they're doing that all the time. I would love to see some research that actually proves that, because in delta, in the deepest realms of delta, you're not there. You know, you probably had the experience, someone you love fell asleep on the couch, you tried to wake them up and they're just not there. They're just totally out of it. They're not there. Their consciousness is not there. In the same way that they now know that when somebody dies, they lost 3/4 of an ounce. Chris, what was that 3/4 of an ounce that they lost? They were there 1 minute and they weren't. That 3/4 of an ounce is the energy that is us, that animates this body. And that's the part of us that survives. I don't know what it does. I mean, I just know in science that we lost. That's why they say this is dead weight, this is live weight. You know, you actually weigh differently when you're alive or dead because of the energy that's coursing through your system. And what we now know is that's called the biophotic system, meaning that when they, in 2001 or 2003, between that time period, they mapped out the human genome. You probably remember that. And they said, hey, we mapped out the human genome. Hooray, we're going to change the world. We're going to make sure people don't look like Dr. Porter and they have hair like you do. And of course, what they found out was that's not the story. What they found out was the fixed genetics. So think of it like bumper, like when you're bowling when you're a kid and you have the bumper so you don't go in the gutter. These genetics are the rails. It doesn't matter what you do. These are the fixed things: your eye color, your hair, your male pattern baldness, your heart, all these systems. Now, the other 99 they said was junk DNA. Well, in 2018, the scientists now found that that's not junk. You know, I love the bumper sticker, God doesn't make any junk, right? So the reality is that in 2018, they found out that DNA changes every 40 seconds. You change, I change, everyone listening to this podcast changes every 40 seconds, every DNA pair, and it's based on everything. Who you hang around, what books do you read, what television you listen to, what radio stations, what's in your rooms, what do you eat, how do you sleep? Everything is playing into that. So what's happening is it's harmonizing and changing. And what they found out in the study that I wanted to share was during COVID, they said, do you look at COVID as a threat, or do you look at it as a challenge? And this could be any illness. It could be your life experience. And they found out that because we all emit this 8-10 nanometer light, we're all light generators. Now that light, that biophotic light, that's poof, we have a spark, that's actually delivering information to our cells. It's telling our cells how to operate. Just like our sun tells our body what to do in the circadian rhythm, right? If we don't get to bed by 10 o'clock, we don't make as much melatonin. If we don't get to bed by 11, we don't clean our liver. If we're not in bed at 2 o'clock, we don't get that bump in our temperature that burns out the toxins in our cells. Most people realize the one at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because they go get coffee and tea and sugar when we should be meditating. But they're using the biological system to run the electrical system. So there's a little miscommunication there. But as we do these kind of things, we get in harmony with our environment. And this biophotic exchange says, hey, if we look at life as a challenge rather than a threat. So what they did in the study, they showed people that looked at that condition of COVID as a threat actually produced 200 times less light. So what does that mean? That means that if I'm going to broadcast, if I have a flashlight and I want to shine it across the room, and it's strong enough to see everything across the room, but now I diminish it by 200, I might not be able to see everything across the room. That means the instruction set from that cell is going to be compromised, which means now the cell is going to operate differently than it's supposed to. And to take it another step forward, there is a technology out there called radionics, which was developed in the 30s. And I was at a convention in Chicago, and they took seeds made by Monsanto that are only one generation seeds. This is how bad the food giants are. They took seeds that are meant to self-produce. I mean, could you imagine, you have a seed that can produce over and over again, it can produce seeds for the next season. But they said, no, it's only one, you got to buy them from us, you're trapped into it. They took these seeds that were one generation seeds, they put them under the right frequency, and I don't know what that is, I'm not a radionic specialist, but I saw it, they showed in the documentary, they broadcasted this frequency in it, those seeds return to their heirloom seeds, which means they return to the most base programming. That seed has a program. That seed knows it's a seed. If it's a walnut, it becomes, it creates walnuts. If it's a sunflower, it becomes a sunflower. So we have a code. So when I saw that, I told my wife, I go, my God, that's us. We've been genetically modified. Not that we intended to do it. I don't care if you eat genetically modified food or not. You have been genetically modified because of our environment. Now, what if we could expose our body to the right frequency that returned us to our base programming, our health, our healing? Our natural state is one of abundance and health and vitality and joy, but you have to look at life as a challenge rather than a threat.
Yeah.
So we have to actually be counterproductive to what our base programming over the thousands of years of trying to survive, because so many people are still in survivor mode. And so that's one of the key things that I like to express to people is, let's get you into a state of optimistic thinking, instead of a state of pessimistic thinking.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
So I want to unwrap a couple of things. You talk about people not being able to meditate because their monkey mind is going crazy, and that's actually not having enough energy. My son is ADHD, and I'm sure you know a lot because I told you, and I told the listeners in the beginning, you know a lot about a lot, that the drugs they tend to give these children is actually amphetamine. And I think that he lives in more of a monkey mind state, and the amphetamines actually speed up his mind, give him the energy so that he can actually process things before he takes action, right? He's like, my son, see sword, touch sword, no, see sword, think about it, because my brain is now working a little bit faster because I'm on an amphetamine. Now maybe touch sword. So I think there's parallels there, and that's always been my interpretation. You ran through the brain waves, right? So you got beta, alpha, theta, delta. You said level. Is that a particular level, or is that an
level is 10
wave?
hertz. They say that 10 hertz frequency is like the neutral for the brain.
Okay.
So like when you're at rest, you don't have to worry about anything. You're just sitting there. Your brain should sync back to alpha.
Okay.
But if you have an agitated mind, it's going to sync up to beta, and then you're going to have anxiety, stress. And what's like in your son, I would bet dollars for donuts that if I did an EEG scan on him, which means we're looking at the electrical activity in the brain, and we're measuring its activity, that he would have a high degree of beta and a low degree of alpha. Well, so it's causing him to become hyperactive.
I would think that for another reason, right? Because you said beta is kind of, we'll call it the paranoid frequency, right? Like this is the survival frequency. You talk about we're wired to be negative, and I love there was some meme, or I read it somewhere, like cavemen didn't roll the rock that blocked their cave out of the way and step outside and say, what a beautiful sunrise that is. No, they walked out. They didn't even stick their head. Like they moved the rock a little bit. They stuck their head out, and they're like, "Is anything out there trying to kill me?" Because if I don't have that negative, pessimistic, paranoid perspective, then I get eaten. So we really are wired to be negative, and that's something that through this kind of NLP, through a device like BrainTap, you're working on making those changes. How many programs do you have in BrainTap? Because I know it's
we over 2,000, and we add anywhere between 20 to 30 every month. And because you need to listen to different things. It's called neuroplasticity. If you have to have something novel and unique. So every session has a different encoding, and it's not for the conscious mind. It's for the other than conscious, is what I call it. So the brain is listening, and there's a cortical response, especially in the amygdala, which gets hijacked. This is the emotional, the reptilian kind of brain, the ancient brain that is probably driving your son's behavior when he's acting out. Because when
100%.
when that region of the brain gets activated, reason goes out the window. That's when you have an argument and right after the argument's done, you released all that pinned up stress. You go, damn, I wish I'd have said something different. I wish I would have.
Yeah.
But in that moment, emotion drives the behavior. And when it's like they push a button and all reason goes out the window, and this happens a lot it happens to all of us at some point if we get stressed out.
Yeah. So 2,000 programs you're coming up with. How many did you say regularly?
We do between 20 and 40 every month. And this is not just me. I usually produce anywhere between 5 to 10 new ones every month because I have a list of what I'm doing. I just finished a cognitive repair program that we've been testing for healing the brain and working with the doctors that we work with. We just did a deal with Tom Brady's group, TBRX, and they wanted to have something to work with cognitive decline because the brain is so important, and we focus on recovery. So if you're listening out there, it's not about doing something, it's about allowing the brain and the body to do what it does best. The body's intelligence knows what to do, but we have to get all the stress and interference out of the way so the body can do the work that it knows what to do. It already has the instruction set. Like I said, with the right frequency generator, if you knew the right frequency to tune, our body would tune and we'd become superhuman.
So you mentioned Tom Brady, that kind of a question that I was really kind of ask a little bit later. You have a program that is very specific about golf. How different are these programs, or are you, if I heard correctly, some of it you're just trying to tweak it to catch the brain off guard, or so that the brain is like, oh, that's interesting, let me kind of reconnect with that? There's never a session that's the same. Because your brain is very intelligent. It's super intelligent. You probably saw Rain Man where Dustin Hoffman, they throw the toothpicks on the ground and he says 2,763 or whatever. And they go, he counted them. Well, believe it or not, we all count them. Just like looking at the monitor. We know when that RGB or that red, green, and blue LED is changing. We omit it. Just like we might omit the salt shaker or the ketchup bottle from the refrigerator because when we say we don't see it, and then our family member comes out and says, hey, it's right here. And you go, well, it wasn't there a minute ago. Because we know that our brain renders reality. It doesn't create reality. I love it when people say they create their reality. All realities exist right now. We perceive the reality that fits our mode or model of the world. So we perceive that reality. It's already here. One of the best examples I have a YouTube video where I'm doing Danica Patrick's neurocheck reading. Mm-hmm. Now, she does something that we're not supposed to be able to do with our brain. They say that in neuroscience, we cannot process speeds of over 180 miles an hour. But every astronaut does it. And guess what NASA teaches them? They call it pro-cognitive thinking. You have to think ahead of time. Because if you think in time, you're already dead. You got to think 3 to 4 minutes ahead of time. So she's driving a car at 220 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour faster than we're supposed to be able to process. She's predicting the future based on whatever information she has right now. Now, the reason I know she's very good at it is she has the highest rated brain we've ever scanned in energy. And I'm sure there are other race car drivers that probably could beat her because she wasn't the best at driving an automobile. But so these guys, when you think, they think, oh, they're just sitting in a car driving around a circle. No, their brain is doing high-level physics. Just like the golfer. When you talk about golf, and somebody goes, why doesn't everybody play golf? Because it's hard. Because you're playing high-level physics. You're swinging a club around a plane and at different angles with different shafts and everything. But your brain, once you get in, it's a feeling, right? When you're really hitting the ball right. And I grew up on golf courses, so it really, golf is played between the ears. When you think about, if you could take all the physical time you're playing golf on a round of golf, it wouldn't take 5 minutes. But what are you doing between each shot?
You're walking, you're talking to yourself, you're talking to other people.
Beating yourself up,
Yes,
because
right.
that's what humans tend to do.
Right. But if you look at the pros, one of the things I learned early on when I worked with a lot of pro athletes, they found out in sports psychology that, hey, if you hit a bad shot, stay there for a minute, visualize the perfect shot 3 times. The brain will omit the one that's not like the others. It's kind of like the game, what's not like this? And so when you think about the 3 shots going right, have you ever noticed that pro golfers, almost every time they hit a bad shot, they hit a super shot next? Because their belief, this is what happens when people say, when people go, let's say you're a scratch golfer, which means you're hitting par, right? And on the front 9, you are under par. You're under 4, and you go, wow, I'm going to have my best. But then in the next round, you're 4 over par. So now you're a scratch golfer, because that's what you believe you are. You could have had your best round, but because, we usually sink to what we believe ourselves to be, and then our body mechanics will mimic that. So in golf, the biggest thing we do for golfers is we take their conscious mind out of the equation. You don't golf with your conscious mind. You golf with your unconscious. Because it's a feeling. You grab the club, you have the feeling, you've got the right club, you've got the right beliefs, everything's lined up, you visualize it in your mind, you see it touching down on the green, having the backspin, going toward the hole, you go through the motions, and voila, it happens. All of these things connect, you get this great warm feeling, and you go, wow, it happened. You go, how can I capture that? Every golfer's dream is to have that feeling every time, because that's what, when somebody says, why do you keep golfing? Because that feeling happens at least occasionally on the golf course. It doesn't happen all the time, but and that's true with every sport.
I wanted to go back to get hopefully an interesting question. We covered these brainwaves, right? Beta, alpha, theta, delta. If you could only harness one of those, which one would you be harnessing and why?
There's actually another brainwave I would choose. There's actually one there's 16 different brainwaves, but we don't talk about them all the time. But there's one called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. This is a brainwave that straddles high alpha and low beta. This is the one that has to do, when we do our dementia studies and when we did our study with the Saving Your Brain study, that's now a book called Saving Your Brain, we showed that when we increase this frequency of this brainwave, you're just smarter. Your brain works better. You can think, you're creative, you can interact, and it's probably the one that most people listening don't have. Because if you have it, you're a genius. You have. It seems like you have superpowers, but the reality is, it's like having the Wi-Fi password in 1976 to Google, and you're playing Trivial Pursuit. The information's already there, but you don't have. If you don't have that brainwave, you don't have access to it.
I think if you say that most people don't have it, I think if you've ever driven in Houston, you would know that most people are not using their SMR frequency.
Most people drop into deep alpha and they're disassociated. When you look over to that person next to you and they're like, are they there? In psychology, we know that 25% of the time you are not consciously present. Your unconscious is running the program. That's why you can drive across Houston and you go, did I go by that store? Did I make that light? But you made it because you were in your head doing whatever you need to be doing, and your subconscious took it over. When Bruce Lipton says 95% of what happens to you today is controlled by your subconscious mind, 95%. And then you look at Deepak Chopra, who's been in this field a long time as well. He says that 97% of the thoughts you're thinking today you thought about yesterday, and only 3% of tomorrow is going to change. So what are you pretending not to know? People go to a lot of trouble pretending they don't have addictions, they don't have problems, they don't have issues. And then they blame it on those issues, those outside resources. But the reality is that you have the internal power and capacity to change any part of your life, because when you change the thing you're looking at from the inside out, the thing you're looking at changes. It's just a law of nature. So, you can look at it as a big problem, or you can look at it as, hey, this is a challenge. Remember, we want to look at life as a challenge, and then we now know epigenetically speaking, because they now know that those are epigenetic, meaning that it works on top of the genetic system, that it turns on your genetics they say are like a pistol, but your epigenetics are the bullet. So whatever is happening in your environment, and your attitude, and your breathing, whatever you're thinking, that triggers the right, genetics to turn on and turn off. And it's changing, like I said, every 40 seconds. So we need to know that we're in flow. When the ancients said, getting up every morning, when you said about the guy looking out the cave, that's a good analogy. I'm probably going to steal it from you.
I stole it from someone else. Feel free.
So, but when they say, what they say is that getting up every morning is like stepping into a river. The river looks the same, smells the same, flows the same, but not 1 ounce of that water is the same. It's flowing. Our body is flowing. That's why we have to do things like supplementation. Some supplementations have a half-life of 4 hours, so we have to take it more often. Some will stay with us for up to 72 hours. That's the nervous system's recycle time. So we have to know what our body's capacity is and how to use it. But we're not the same person. Nobody listening to this webinar is actually the same as when they started. If we got one new thought in their brain, neuroscience says they had to rewire their whole brain to accommodate that new thought. So I'm hoping that somebody heard one new thought today, so they had to rewire their whole brain, and they're different than they were when they started this show.
And hopefully that wasn't be paranoid when you're looking around the rock.
Yes. If they get up and walk outside,
and enjoy the sunrise. I want to kind of squeeze in two questions before we get our wrap up questions. This has already been amazing. One of them is, all right, so you've got the book. It's the Brain Fitness Blueprint, right?
Yes.
That's coming out soon. Did you say
August? It's scheduled to come out in August of this year. Yeah.
And talk about like why you wrote that book and maybe something surprising that somebody would find in that book.
Well, I wrote the book because I felt that I haven't written a book in like almost 8 years, so I figured it was time to bring the new science, all the new sciences to bear. But also, I wanted to make it clear that these are everyday things you can do. There are simple things, not just BrainTap. BrainTap's just one thing, but there are a lot of other things you can do. And I think the most surprising thing people would find in the book is that you already possess everything you need. You know, if you start doing things like using grounding, getting out in sunlight, doing these things, or you use the recommendations, there's always a solution. You know, no one out there on the planet, and I mean no one, can eat off the grocery store shelves. You have to supplement because there's no nutrition anymore. You know, so you have to figure that out. No one is going to survive if they sit on their butt. Their neuropinephrine, they won't have BDNF, which is the brain-derived neurotropic factor, which creates neuroplasticity. And I think the thing that's going to shock them is there's 3 primary brainwave patterns that happen through breath. The first one is called the breath of fire or psychological breathing that you do in the morning. This is a rapid breath and it's simple. You can do it for 5 minutes and you'll wake up the brain. You'll create dopamine, norepinephrine, and cortisol, which is what we need in the morning, not a cup of coffee. I mean, I'm not against coffee, but have it 2 hours after awakening because there's something called the cortisol trough that you crush when you drink coffee straight away. So you want to get that, you want to get the brain regulating on its own energy, in other words, and then the brain will wake up that way. In the middle of the day, we need a psychological boost. So there's something called box breathing. I believe it's good enough for special forces. It's good enough for every person. So, you know, when you think about box breathing, it's a very simple technique. You breathe in to the count of 4, you hold at the count of 4, you breathe out to the count of 4, and you hold it out to the count of 4, and you keep that box breathing. And what it does, it starts to regulate the system. It literally reboots the nervous system. And most people are stuck in what we call neurological lock with their sympathetic system, their fight or flight system. So you have to disengage that. So it's like they've got the gas pedal mashed and the brake mashed, and they're wondering why they're not going anywhere. Well, you got to let go of the brake if you want to go forward, and you got to let go of the gas if you want to stop. But and that causes that anxiety, and why they shake and why they quake is because the nervous system doesn't know what to do. Now, at night, the biggest problem we have is that we are so overstimulated. There's actually some neuroscientists say that if our grandparents were delivered to Times Square in New York, they would die of neuroshock because of, you know, everything that's going, and you go, I love it. I mean, I love that kind of stuff. You know, I'm one of those guys that I like the mall on Christmas time. You know, some people avoid it like the plague. I feel alone when I'm there, even though there's a lot of people. I guess because I grew up with 9 kids and it was just chaotic all the time. You know, it reminds me of home or something.
That's normal. Yeah.
So at night, the breath that I think is the most important is called the 4-8 breath. And you breathe into the count of 4. This will trigger your your sympathetic system. And it's important we trigger it, that you control the sympathetic system, not the sympathetic system controls you. And this is a statement that I like to make. Let life happen through you, not to you. Mm-hmm. So when you start to control your nervous system, you control I'm a martial artist, and I studied in Wudang on the mountain and things like that for some of it, but most of it was done, of course, here in America. But every martial artist knows that the person you're fighting is not outside of you. The person you're fighting is inside of you. And if you can master that person, you can master every activity in your life. So you own that feeling. You got to become comfortable being uncomfortable. That's how our brain learns and our body develops and thrives. And then you connect that breath. So you breathe it into 4. You study that tension and stress in the body. Then you breathe out to the count of 8. And when you breathe out to the count of 8, you're triggering the parasympathetic system. And what will happen is, after you practice this a few times, you'll get a wave of just euphoria. And if you do this before bed, you will start to develop the deepest sleep cycles you've ever seen. Now, of course, if you have BrainTap, you just put it on and we teach you how to do that. But if you don't have it, you just do these breathing techniques and you will get really deep sleep scores. And if you have a ring like you have, or the Whoop, or any other biometric, you're going to prove it to yourself, because you are the control factor. You're in one, as they say. You're the research project of one.
Yeah, I've started doing something recently, which is actually a rapid, fairly shallow breath for about 10, and then a kind of slower, probably 8 in with multiple stages, and then a long, slow out, which is, I don't know, it feels very natural to kind of amp things up a little bit and drop it down, amp things up a bit. And maybe that's what you're describing, like get into that sympathetic and then drive the parasympathetic, get back up into the sympathetic, drive that parasympathetic. Like I've just started that recently after having a conversation with Sachin Patel.
Oh yeah, that's a great.
It wasn't his advice, but it's something that I took out of that conversation.
Yeah, your breath is the link to your nervous system, and it's also when people say they can't think or they can't do public speaking, it's because they get stressed out and they're not breathing. The ancient teachers and the rishis would say your knowledge is in your next breath. If you want to get stupid, just stop breathing. The worst thing you can do, I think Rothschild said it, the worst thing you can do in business is stop breathing. Breath links to everything.
So one other quick question, because I want to tie this to longevity and then jump into our wrap-up questions. So you've been working, 3 decades on this technology. Why would you say somebody who's focused on longevity, and I think health is an easy tie, but longevity specifically, why should they be interested in your technology, in the things that you've accumulated in this book?
Yeah, the number one reason is their biology. We house 25 grams of sugar in our liver. And if we look at life as a threat, every time we have a stress response, that sugar gets dumped into the system. It's not what we're eating, it's what's eating us. So when that dumps into the system, the body doesn't know there's not a saber-toothed tiger. That sugar is destroying us from the inside out. That's why people that don't eat sugar go, how did I get high blood sugar? How am I a diabetic? Because our body creates all the sugar we need. We used to, 100 years ago, the average American ate 5 pounds of sugar a year. Now it's over 100. That's probably the worst thing you can do to the body. So if we regulate our stress response, and this is what BrainTap does better than anything else, and why every one of our studies shows almost a 70% improvement in sleep scores, is because when you downregulate the nervous system and get it, you could start to control your nervous system. Don't let life control your nervous system. I tell, as a joke, I kind of tell people, you control the weather. It's always sunny inside Patrick's head. In fact, my wife will tell you, they call me Dr. Positive for a reason. And I've actually been accused of being too damn positive. And I said, I'd rather be positive every day and be disappointed every once in a while than wake up every morning disappointed and prove myself disappointment every day and be miserable. And then not even notice the good things, the beautiful things. Yeah. And the other, just real quick, is Mike Tyson said it best. He's probably the best philosopher we have for this equation. He said, everybody has a plan till they get hit. Everybody's going to get hit. What are you doing to bring your body, your mind, your faculties back to online invincible, unlimited? Or do you have a bad morning and that ruins your evening? You know, I love Alex Guerrero when he was working with Tom Brady. Tom would have, you know, people go, how did Tom throw 3 interceptions in the first half, come out and win the Super Bowl by throwing 4 touchdowns in the second half? Well, Alex Guerrero said, when you have a bad thing happen to you, you only get 10 seconds to muse on it. Then get over it.
Yeah.
You know, and most people have a bad thing happen to them and they start calling everybody they know. Well, this bad thing happened to me. They don't realize that when you speak it, there's a reason that they say, they call it spelling. You know, with words, you're casting a spell on yourself. The more you talk about the negative, the more it ingrains into your subconscious and makes it a reality. So what if bad things happen to you? So what if your parents were this? So what if you were this? You need to take your pain and make it your passion. You know, in my case, in one of the chapter of the first book that we were talking about earlier, I have a chapter that says I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic. Why does it serve me to say, poor me, my dad was an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic, I've got to go to meetings and stand up every week and say I'm an alcoholic? That doesn't serve anybody. I'm not an alcoholic. Nobody can handle alcohol. I'm a human being with infinite potential that can't drink alcohol. So what? I can't drink poison either. You know, that doesn't make me a bad person. You know, it just makes me smart. You know, so you have to kind of reframe. And I think the more people understand that you control the weather, like I was saying, you control the atmosphere, you control the environment. My kids will tell you if you interviewed them, they're now 40 now, and my grandkids are playing around with it now, but I would say never give anybody your remote control. You know, the big joke is, you know, who controls the remote control controls the TV, right? Well, if you give away your remote control to your family, your friends, your coworkers, your boss, your spouse, you never know what channel they're going to push. And then you're like a puppet on a string. Take back the remote control and you know, put that 256K encryption on it so nobody can get in there and control your behaviors.
That's awesome. This has been as amazing as I thought it would be. I'll ask off air because I don't want you to commit in front of the audience, but I'd love to have more of this conversation. Let's get to the wrap-up questions, right? Okay. So we're a longevity and health podcast. Dr. Porter, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
Well, I've considered 120 because that's what I read about in the literature, but I'm focused right now on 93 for some reason. That just sticks in my mind. But I want to go out with a bang. I don't want to burn out. I want to blow out the candles and be done. You know, like I love the way Parahansa Yogananda did it. He looked over at he just gave a talk. This is the way I'd like to go. He just gave a talk. He goes, sits down in Ensenada, California, and says, I'm out of here. And he left his body. I mean, I would love that to be me. I mean, because I know this isn't the reality. This isn't the whole deal. This is just part of it. You know, and so, you know, I'm not, and I love the way that Sai Baba was asked. He's a guru that in India, and they said, how old are you? And he said, you're asking the age of my house. And they go, why don't you keep yourself young? He says, this is a shirt. In the infinite scope of possibilities, this is only one shirt. I'm going to wear many shirts in my lifetime. You know, so... Yeah.
It's interesting, go out with a bang, right? Because I did, during this podcast, I've interviewed so many people, and one of the consistent kind of descriptions of aging that I think resonates with people is, you know, not this kind of the last 20% of their life living in some state of infirmment, but actually being strong. And the best example I'd come up with so far is a candle, right? Where the candle burns brightly all the way to the end, and then for a very brief period, it just snuffs out. But maybe that candle for you is like a firecracker.
Yeah, that's
right. So it burns exactly the same.
Yeah, my family knows I don't want to live forever on machines or something like that. That's crazy talk. I know there's more than that in the universe. So I want to have a good quality of life, you know, for as long as I can. And my goal is to be able to do everything I'm doing today up to the day I die.
Till the end. And then sit down in a chair and say, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
All right. How long do you think humans can live?
Well, I think that the Coptics actually have recorded history of 246 years. If somebody wants to read a book called My Life Preceding 5,000 Burials, they can read all about it. You can get it on Amazon. It's a fascinating book where they talk about and they were doing biohacking at the time of Christ, before Christ. So, I mean, they were looking at different interventions to the body. Most of it was nutrition. they would live a whole life doing certain nutritional practices.
Excellent. All right. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets? Let's call them shortcuts, because everybody has loves shortcuts for longevity or a long health span that you would share.
Well, if you came to my house, you do it with me every morning. I start off every morning I was trained by the Maharishi to do TM. So I do my TM meditation on a vibration mat by Craig Goldberg, and that vibration sends energy through my spine and gets me doing. Then I do my infrared sauna, and then I do my PMF, and that's my morning routine, because first of all I want to center myself, then I want to energize myself, and then I want to heal myself, which is with the PMF, and then every other day I use my what they call vision bodysuit, which is, now that I'm 63. I get the workout that everybody else gets in 4 hours and 20 minutes. So there's always a hack for that. And muscle growth is important. If you want to live forever, start building your muscle. Muscle is, every muscle, think of it as like a chemical factory for you to feel good, look good, and really thrive.
I think muscle is the currency of life. All right. So you've got TM meditation, infrared sauna, PEMF, and then every other day vision body suit. Is that the like the TENS?
Yes.
Like a whole suit that's the TENS. Awesome.
And of course, when I'm doing my meditation, I usually do the gamma sessions. So I got my BrainTap on, doing my TM and getting out of this planet. Just really focusing and really opening up to the possibilities of the universe for me and what I can do today. Every day, I look at today as a whole lifetime. So what can I do today to make my life better? And I always do something every day that's going to outlive me, whether it's to write an article, create a session, or something.
And every day is the same stream, but totally different water. What are 1 to 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
Well, they do everything but control their stress. You could be taking the world's greatest supplements, and we proved this in a study we did with intravenous therapy. We showed that if you use BrainTap at the time of doing that therapy rather than listening to a phone, you absorb 30 times more of the nutrition. So if you don't deal with the stress first, all those, when you're under stress, most people know that your body is, all the extremities get the blood. But when you're digesting, if you ever looked at heart rate variability, your heart rate variability crashes when you eat, because all the blood goes into your abdomen and your organs, so you can digest, metabolize, and get the energy from the food. But if you're in a fight or flight, you can't digest, metabolize, and utilize that energy in your body.
Okay, so we got not controlling stress is the thing people get absolutely wrong. Dr. Porter, how can people contact you?
They can go to braintap.com for some free tips, or they can go to drpatrickporter.com, and that links to all the social medias and everything like that. There's a lot of free videos on there where they can learn more about how to improve their life and where I'm at, what I'm doing.
What's the next conference you're heading to?
I'm heading. I've got a month off, which is kind of an unusual thing, which is great. I get to play here in New Bern, but I'm going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona, for the Brimhall Homecoming. John Brimhall is a pioneer in this field. He's been doing it for over 40 years, and we support him and are part of his homecoming event, where he brings in doctors from all over the world to learn his methods. Excellent.
And what in the near future are you excited about?
I'm excited about doing more with sleep. There's a company that we work with now called Friends. It's a Friends band doing EEG, which for less than $600 you can do clinical grade EEG on yourself. Wow. And it's called the Friends Band, and we're working out a program so we can work that Friends Band into a BrainTap and have a sleep mask that we can create the perfect sleep cycle for any individual. Now that's still in the lab, but that's what I'm excited about. We'll see where it goes. If my fantasies come true, we'll have a sleep mask that can measure you in EEG, not ECG, because we're measuring the actual and it's very different when you use the Friends Band and the rings. It's night and day, because
it's accurate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's pretty. Yeah, I've heard that these Whoop, Oura Ring, whatever, are about 70% accurate, and where they really start to kind of, where they're weakest is it actually REM sleep? Is it actually deep sleep? What is it actually? All right, you can find Dr. Porter, braintap.com or drpatrickporter.com. You can find all of his links there. Dr. Porter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I love, and out there, just know that you're far greater than you've been led to believe. Let's just activate that system. There's a genius out there that's going to make the world a better place. It could be you.
And you could find his book, Awaken the Genius, that is available on Amazon, and that's exactly what he's talking about. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.